By 3 o'clock, the square in Rheinhausen is past its capacity, and the town has stopped pretending to direct the crowd. The marshals in their orange tabards have given up at the 4 entrances and are now leaning on the bollards smoking, because the people who were coming have come, and the people who were going have not yet decided to go, and the square holds, by the Polizei estimate, later filed and not contested, 3,870 bodies under a sky that is the particular hard blue of a North German afternoon in late June, with the sun nearly overhead and the heat coming up off the cobbles in a way the older residents will refer to that evening as Backofenhitze, oven heat, and the younger ones will not refer to at all because they are drinking. The brass band on the south side of the square, the works band from the rendering plant in Northeim, in their green jackets, has just finished the second movement of a march nobody listening could name, and is wiping mouthpieces on shirt cuffs in the pause before the third. The brass band on the north side, the volunteer fire band from Rheinhausen itself, is half a beat into the Egerländer Marsch, which they play at every fair, and which the town considers theirs. The third band, the children's recorder ensemble from the Grundschule, is not currently playing and is being fed bratwurst by the Schmidt brothers, who run the largest grill stall and are sweating through their aprons. The bouncy castle on the east side, a red and yellow inflatable in the shape of a castle that the company that hires them out has called Burg Drachenfels for 20 years, contains 9 children of varying sizes and 1 teenage girl who is in charge of them and has stopped trying. The square is, in other words, behaving the way a square behaves at 3 in the afternoon on the Saturday of the Midsummerfest, which is to say it is loud, it is full, it smells of grilled pork and spilled beer and sunscreen and the particular sweetness of Berliner Pfannkuchen in hot oil, and the sound of it, if you were standing at any of the 4 entrances with your eyes closed, would be the layered roar of 3,870 people doing entirely unrelated things in the same air. At 3 minutes past 3, a Dutch photographer named Marielle van Goor, and who has come down from Groningen for the weekend with her husband, and is shooting on a Leica with a 35mm lens, climbs the 3 stone steps of the War Memorial on the west side of the square to get the elevation for a wide frame. Her husband is at the beer tent. She has, over the previous half hour, taken 72 frames. She is, when she climbs the steps, looking for the 73rd. At 4 minutes past 3, the children's parade, which is the centerpiece of the Midsummerfest, and which the town has held without interruption since 1947, turns into the square from the Marktstrasse entrance, led by the 8-year-old daughter of the mayor in a flower crown made by her grandmother, and followed by 93 other children in flower crowns made by various other grandmothers, and a number of dogs in flower crowns made by nobody in particular. The parade moves at the pace of the slowest dog. It crosses the square diagonally toward the platform on the east side, where the mayor, who is sober and tired and on his 4th term, will give the speech he has given 4 times before, with minor variations. At 5 minutes past 3, the brass band on the south side begins the 3rd movement. At 6 minutes past 3, the square pauses. It is not a noticed pause. It is not even, in any meaningful sense, a pause. It is a half-second during which, by the testimony later assembled by Marielle van Goor from her photograph, and from 3 other photographs taken by 3 other people, and from the partial recollections of perhaps a dozen non-locals, every person in the square, every adult, every child, every member of every brass band, every Schmidt brother at the grill, every teenager at the bouncy castle, every dog in a flower crown, stops what they are doing, holds it, and resumes it. The brass band on the south side does not lose the beat. The brass band continues the 3rd movement on the next downbeat, as though the downbeat were where it had always been. The brass band on the north side does the same. The children in the parade do not break step. The parade continues forward as though it had not stopped. The Schmidt brothers do not drop the sausages they were turning. Only the sausages are turned. The mayor on the platform does not stop drinking from the bottle of water he was raising to his mouth. The water is drunk. Marielle Van Goor, on the steps of the War Memorial, takes the 73rd frame and the 73rd frame, when she develops it 3 days later in Groningen, will show 3,870 bodies in identical mid-stillness, in a way that no candid photograph of a crowd has ever shown, in a way that her husband, who is a chemist and a skeptic and has a professional disinterest in the supernatural, will not be able to explain. The pause ends. The square resumes. The third movement continues. The parade continues. The mayor drinks his water. Nobody in the square notices. This is the thing the story is about. Not the pause. The not noticing. Or at 7 minutes past 3, a teenage girl named Leah Brewer, 15, from Bremerhaven, who is visiting her grandmother for the long weekend, and who is, and this matters, bored, becomes aware that she has stopped chewing. She is at the edge of the square near the bratwurst stall, and she has a sausage in a bread roll halfway to her mouth, and the bite that was already in her mouth is, she realizes, unchewed. She has been holding it. She does not know for how long. She chews. She swallows. She looks around to see whether anyone has noticed her not chewing, because Leah is 15, and being noticed is the central horror of her current life. And what she observes, when she looks around, is that the woman to her left, a stout woman in a dirndl who is also eating a sausage, is, at that moment, halfway through a chew of her own. The woman's jaw is in motion. The woman is chewing. The woman is, Leah observes, chewing in a way that does not seem to be the resumption of chewing, but the first chew, as though the bite the woman has in her mouth has just been taken, and yet Leah did not see her take it, and the bread roll in the woman's hand is missing exactly one sausage-sized bite. Leah looks at her own bread roll. Her bread roll is also missing a bite. She does not remember taking it. She files this because Leah is the kind of teenager who files things, under weird, ask grandmother, and she eats the rest of the sausage, and she walks toward the bouncy castle to see if her younger cousin is still in it. At 9 minutes past 3, in the queue for the Berliner Pfannkuchen stall, a hospital chaplain named Sister Almut Reichelt, who is on her day off, and who has driven over from Göttingen with her elderly mother in the passenger seat of her Polo, becomes aware that the queue has not moved. She has been in the queue, she estimates, for some minutes, and she has been third from the front, and she is still third from the front. And yet, she has the distinct impression that several transactions have taken place in front of her, that the woman at the counter has handed over Pfannkuchen and received a money and handed over change. And yet the line has not advanced, and the woman at the counter is, currently, taking the order of the same person who, Sister Almut would have said, ordered some minutes ago. She looks at her watch. Her watch says 9 minutes past 3. She is fairly sure her watch said 9 minutes past 3 the last time she looked at it. She is not certain when the last time she looked at it was. She is not, in fact, certain that she has been looking at her watch at all, because the queue does not move, and the queue does not move, and the queue does not move, and yet she is, when she next becomes aware of her own body, holding a paper plate with 2 Berliner Pfannkuchen on it and a €5 note's worth of change in her other hand, and her mother is saying, "Come on, Almut, where do you want to sit?" And Sister Almut, who has been a hospital chaplain for 23 years, and who has sat with the dying in numbers she has stopped counting, files this, without files, without a procedure, simply files it inside herself, underspeak to nobody about this until tomorrow, and follows her mother to a bench by the fountain. At 10 minutes past 3, a child named Jakob, a 6 years old, who has just last week learned to read a digital clock, who is sitting on his father's shoulders at the back of the crowd watching the parade, says, to no one in particular, in the clear declarative way of a child stating a thing, the clock did the wrong number. His father, who is talking to a friend from the Schützenverein, says, what clock? Jakob points. The clock on the town hall, the large white-faced clock that has been on the town hall since 1903 and is read by the entire town as a public utility, says 312. Jakob, who has just last week learned that after 6 comes 7, says, it went from 6 to 12. His father says, no, my love, that's not how clocks work. Jakob, who has been right about the clock, and who knows he has been right about the clock, says it did though. His father says, eat your pretzel. Oh, Jakob eats his pretzel. The clock on the town hall does, in fact, between 6 minutes past 3 and 12 minutes past 3 on the afternoon of the Midsommerfest, advance by 6 minutes in what the videotape from the Sparkasse security camera across the square will later, when Marielle Van Goor obtains it through a Freedom of Information request she lodges from Groningen, show to be a single frame. One frame at 6 minutes past 3 on the dot, in which the minute hand jumps from the 6-minute mark to the 12-minute mark. The town clock is mechanical. The town clock has been mechanical since 1903. The town clock is wound by the verger of the Stadtkirche every Tuesday morning and has not gained or lost more than 90 seconds in a calendar year since 1956. The Sparkasse footage shows the jump. The Sparkasse footage also shows, in the same frame, 3,870 bodies in identical mid-stillness, which the bank's regional security manager, when shown the frame by Marielle Van Goor's lawyer 4 months later, will describe as a compression artifact, and decline to discuss further. Marielle, on the steps of the War Memorial, lowers her camera at 12 minutes past 3. She looks at the back of the camera. She scrolls through the last few frames. She is on a Leica, but a digital Leica, and she has the 73rd frame on the screen, and she is looking at it, and she is doing what photographers do when a frame contains something that should not be there, which is to look at it without yet knowing what she is looking at. The frame shows the square. The frame shows the bands and the parade and the bouncy castle. The frame shows everyone in the square in identical mid-stillness. The brass band on the south side is mid-blow, lips on mouthpieces, no instrument lowered. The brass band on the north side is mid-blow. The children in the parade are mid-step, in such a way that of the 94 children, every left foot is forward and every right foot is back, which is not. Marielle knows this because she has photographed parades, the way a parade ever looks at any given instant, because a parade contains children of different ages with different stride lengths walking out of step. The dogs in flower crowns are mid-stride. The Schmidt brothers are mid-turn at the grill, both of them turning the same sausage, which is not possible. The mayor is mid-drink. The bottle is at his lips. Marielle does what people do, as she raises the camera and takes the 74th frame, which shows the square moving again, normally, with the bands playing and the parade walking and the Schmidt brothers turning different sausages. She thinks, the camera did something. She thinks, a long exposure somehow, a setting I knocked. She checks the settings. The settings have not been knocked. The exposure was 1/125th of a second. The frame is sharp. The frame is, in every technical sense, a single instant. She thinks, I will look at this later. She puts the camera down. She does not, for the rest of the afternoon, raise it again. This is the first moment of what? And the language is inadequate, because the language is being supplied by the things the town's body has procedures for. What Sister Almut Reichelt, 4 months later, on a slow Tuesday evening in her room at the convent in Göttingen, will write to Marielle van Goor and call die absorption. The absorption. The town's body has procedures for absorbing noticers, and the first procedure, the lightest, is the one that just acted on Marielle van Goor, which is the procedure of, I will look at this later, which is the procedure of, I do not have to deal with this in the square. The procedure does not feel like coercion. The procedure feels like a reasonable adult decision. The procedure feels like exactly the decision Marielle van Goor, a photographer of 30 years' experience, would make if she had captured something interesting and unusual on a hot afternoon in a crowded square in a country that is not hers, in a language she does not speak. The procedure is, in fact, the decision she makes. She makes it, or she puts the camera down. She goes to find her husband at the beer tent. The square continues. At 14 minutes past 3, Leah Brouwer reaches the bouncy castle and finds her younger cousin Pia, who is 7, and Pia comes out of the castle red-faced and ecstatic and asks for water. And Leah hands her the bottle of water she has been carrying in her backpack. And Pia drinks half of it. And Leah, while she waits for Pia to drink, looks across the square at the war memorial and sees the Dutch photographer descending the 3 steps with her camera lowered, and Leah, who is 15, who is bored, who is therefore looking, sees that the photographer is moving in a way that does not quite match the rest of the crowd. The photographer is walking through the bodies in the square, as though the bodies are not bodies, but obstacles. The photographer is, Leah sees, the only person in the square who is currently not in conversation, not eating, not playing, not part of the parade, not at any of the stalls, not buying or selling anything. And Leah registers this as the kind of solitariness that 15-year-old girls in unfamiliar towns notice. Because 15-year-old girls in unfamiliar towns are themselves alone. And Leah, almost without intending to, files the photographer too. Under another one? She does not, at this point, know what another one means. She has only the woman in the dirndl who began chewing in the same instant Leah began chewing. She has, perhaps, also the way the bread roll in her hand was lighter when she next looked at it. She is 15. She has, the way 15-year-olds have, the ability to hold a category open in her mind without yet putting a name on the category. She takes Pia's hand. She walks Pia back toward the fountain where her grandmother is sitting. On the bench by the fountain, Sister Almut Reichelt is eating one of the Berliner Pfannkuchen she does not entirely remember buying. Her mother is eating the other. Her mother is talking about a neighbor who has had a hip replacement. Sister Almut is not in any honest sense listening, because Sister Almut is doing the thing she has trained herself to do over 23 years of bedside work, which is to count the breaths of the person she is sitting with. She is not, however, counting her mother's breaths. She is counting the breaths of everyone in the square, the aggregate breath, the thing she has never tried to count before and is now counting, and what she is registering. And she would not have used the word registering in any other context, but it is the word that arrives, is that the aggregate is too clean. 3,870 people breathing in a hot square should not produce a wave of breath that has any particular shape. The wave should be statistical noise. The wave should average out. The wave Sister Almut is, against her will hearing, has a shape. It is shaped, she thinks, like a slow tide. In, out, with a periodicity of approximately 15 seconds. The crowd is breathing. The crowd is, as a single body, breathing. She closes her eyes. She opens them. the wave is still there. She thinks, I am tired and I have just eaten too much sugar. The thought arrives clean and well-formed, and the way the thought arrived in Marielle Van Goor's mind, that she would look at the photograph later. Sister Almut, however, and this is the thing, has been doing pastoral work long enough to recognize a thought that has been handed to her. She has sat with too many people who have produced, at the end, the sentence, I am tired, and I have just eaten too much sugar, in some equivalent form, the kind of sentence that arrives to cover something a person is not yet ready to look at. She recognizes the shape. She does not, this time, accept it. She thinks deliberately, no. The wave of aggregate breath, in the half-second after she thinks no, breaks. It loses its periodicity. It becomes, for perhaps 4 seconds, the statistical noise it should have been. The crowd breathes raggedly, the way a crowd breathes. Sister Almut hears it. And then, ease slowly, the wave reasserts itself. In, out, 15-second periodicity. Her mother on the bench beside her says, Almut, you've gone pale. Sister Almut says, I have, I think the sun, and her mother says, we should go and sit in the church for a bit. And the Stadtkirche is on the south side of the square, and Sister Almut stands up to walk with her mother to the church, and she takes 3 steps, and then she stops, because she has just understood that we should go and sit in the church for a bit, is the second procedure. It is the procedure of I will remove the noticer from the square. It is, she thinks, looking at her mother, a procedure that is currently being routed through her mother's mouth. Her mother is not aware of routing it. Her mother has, Sister Almut knows, been a kind and intelligent woman for 81 years, and is now beginning, gently, to lose her short-term memory, and is therefore, and Sister Almut understands this in the moment she understands it, exactly the kind of body the town's body would use, because the body it is using does not need to retain the use. Her mother said the sentence. Her mother will not, by tomorrow, remember saying the sentence. The town has used the sentence, and the use has cost the town nothing. Sister Almut sits back down. She says, let's stay here for a moment, Mama. I'd like to watch the parade. Her mother, agreeably, sits back down. This is, Sister Almut understands, the first refusal. She has refused to be moved. She does not know what the consequence of refusal is. She does not know whether there is a third procedure. The third procedure, when it arrives at 16 minutes past 3, in the form of a small boy of perhaps 4 years old, who detaches from a group near the bouncy castle, walks across the cobbles toward Sister Almut's bench, stops 3 meters in front of her, looks at her with the absolute attention only very small children are capable of, and says, in High German that is too clean for a 4-year-old, Die Glocke hat schon geläutet. The bell has already rung. The boy then turns, with the same absolute composure, and walks back toward the bouncy castle. Sister Almut looks up at the Stadtkirche. The bell of the Stadtkirche, which marks the hours and the half-hours, and which she has been hearing all afternoon without listening to, has not rung at 3. She is suddenly certain of this. The bell of the Stadtkirche did not ring at 3, and she has been in the square since 1. She has heard it ring at 1:30, at 2, at 2:30. She has not heard it ring at 3. She also understands, sitting on the bench, that everyone else in the square has heard it ring. The bell has, for everyone except her, rung at 3, and the bell is now, for everyone except her, having already rung, a settled fact of the afternoon. The 4-year-old has come to inform her of the settled fact, the way a courteous host informs a foreign guest that the dinner gong has gone. The 4-year-old, like Sister Almut's mother, will not remember saying the sentence. The 4-year-old's parents, when they find him by the bouncy castle, will scoop him up and not ask where he has been. The town's body has used him. She looks across the square. She finds with her eyes the photographer. The photographer is at the beer tent, talking to her husband, the camera in her bag. The photographer is not looking at anything. The photographer has, Sister Almut understands, been successfully absorbed. The procedure of "I will look at this later" has, with the photographer, held. She finds, with her eyes, the teenage girl. The girl is at the fountain with a younger child, looking. The girl is, Sister Almut sees, also looking. The girl is meeting Sister Almut's eye across the square. They are, for a moment, the only two bodies in 3,870 that are looking at anything. The girl, very slightly, raises one eyebrow. The chaplain, very slightly, nods. The bell of the Stadtkirche rings the half-hour at 3:30. Sister Almut counts. 1, 2, 3. 3 chimes. The half-hour is 1 chime. Then the bell has rung 4 chimes. Nobody else hears the extra one. The chaplain hears it. The teenage girl across the square flinches. The 4th procedure begins. Leah Brower at the fountain says to her grandmother, "I think I want to go home." Her grandmother says, "But the fireworks aren't until 10 Schatz." Leah says, "I have a headache?" Her grandmother, who is 68 and reasonable, says, "Well, let's at least wait for the parade to finish." The parade has, by this point, completed its diagonal of the square and is approaching the platform on the east side. The mayor is preparing his speech. The parade will be over in perhaps 10 minutes. Leah, who has just made eye contact across a square with a middle-aged nun on a bench, who does not know what the eye contact meant, who knows only that the eye contact meant something, looks at her grandmother and recognizes that her grandmother's "let's at least wait for the parade" is not exactly her grandmother's. Her grandmother loves Leah. Her grandmother is also, Leah understands, currently the route by which the town is keeping Leah in the square. The two things are not in conflict. Leah, who is 15 and who has spent 15 years being kept in places by adults who love her, does the things she has lately started doing. She refuses without seeming to refuse. She says, "Okay, but I'm going to walk a bit, my legs hurt," and her grandmother, who is reasonable, says, "Don't go far." Leah walks. She walks toward the fountain, around it, past the bench where Sister Almut is sitting, and as she passes the bench, she slows very slightly, and Sister Almut, without looking at her directly, says, quietly, in the way the chaplain has said quiet things at the bedsides of dying people for 23 years, "Don't leave the square alone." Leah, without breaking step, says, "Why?" Sister Almut says, "Because the procedure for leaving alone is the one I don't want to see." Leah, who is 15, and who has therefore been told, "Don't go off alone" in some variant, by every adult she has ever met, hears in Sister Almut's voice something none of the previous adults have ever managed to put into the warning, which is the registration that the warning is real. Leah slows further. She sits down on the end of Sister Almut's bench, as though she is resting. Sister Almut's mother, on the other end of the bench, smiles at Leah, the way old women smile at well-mannered teenagers, and goes back to her Pfannkuchen. The two of them sit. The square, around them, Ia continues. The parade reaches the platform. The mayor begins his speech. The brass bands fall silent in the way brass bands fall silent for mayors, which is to say, with the instruments lowered, but the players still in formation. The speech is the speech the mayor has given 4 times. It is about the town, about the midsummer, about the children who are the future, about the visitors who are welcome, about the year that has been hard, but not as hard as the year before, about the year ahead, which will be, and the mayor pauses here, which is unusual, because the speech does not have a pause here, but the mayor pauses, And Sister Almut, who is listening now in a way she has not been listening before, hears the pause and understands that the speech is being given by the town through the mayor's mouth, and that the pause is the town gathering itself, and that the next word out of the mayor's mouth will be, very slightly, not the word the mayor has prepared. The mayor says, heller, brighter. The year ahead will be brighter. It is not what he has said the previous 4 times. The previous 4 times he has said besser, better. Heller is not besser. Heller means the year ahead will literally be more illuminated, more visible, more lit. It is the kind of word a man does not, in a stock speech given 4 years running, suddenly substitute for the word he has used 4 times. Leah, beside her, says under her breath, "Did he just say?" Sister Almut says, "Yes." The mayor continues. The speech, after Heller, returns to its usual track. He thanks the bands. He thanks the children. He thanks the volunteer fire service, and the Polizei, and the Schützenverein, and the women's choir, and the works band from Northeim. He invites everyone to enjoy the rest of the afternoon, to support the stalls, to come back in the evening for the fireworks. He raises his bottle of water. He drinks. He steps off the platform. The brass band on the north side begins the Egerländer Marsch again, which they always play after the speech. The square releases. The crowd, which has been gathered around the platform, breaks into smaller knots. The smaller knots begin to move. At 3:41, the photographer leaves the beer tent with her husband and walks toward the Marktstrasse exit. She is going, Sister Almut understands at a glance, to the car. She is leaving early. She is not. She thinks she is, but she is. The procedure of "I will look at this later" has been upgraded to "I will look at this in Groningen," which is the procedure of removing the noticer from the territory. Marielle van Goor will, in Groningen, develop the 73rd frame. She will spend 3 weeks looking at it. She will eventually lodge a Freedom of Information request with the Sparkasse. She will eventually write to Sister Almut. But she will do all of this from Groningen, and the doing of it from Groningen is the form the absorption has taken with her. The square is content to release her. The square is not, Sister Almut understands, content to release her or the girl. The 5th procedure is the one she has been waiting for. It arrives in the form of a kindness. A woman of perhaps 40, in a blue summer dress, with a name badge from the Tourismusverein clipped to her collar, separates herself from a knot near the platform and walks toward the bench. She is smiling. She is not, Sister Almut knows, currently herself. She is the town. The town has chosen her because she is wearing a name badge, because she is therefore an official welcomer, because the procedure routed through an official welcomer carries the weight of help offered to a visitor, which is the heaviest weight the town can apply without anyone noticing the application. The woman in the blue dress stops in front of the bench. She says, in English, because she has clocked Leah's clothes as not from here, and Sister Almut's as not from here either, "Can I help you ladies find anything?" Leah, beside Sister Almut, says nothing. Leah is 15 and has gone very still. Sister Almut says, in German, "Thank you. We are very content." The woman in the blue dress says, in German, "The fireworks at 10 are best seen from the river path. I could walk you." Sister Almut understands that the river path is where the procedure for leaving alone happens. She does not know what the procedure is. She is, she realizes, the only person on this bench who has any business knowing what the procedure is, because Leah is 15, and Leah's grandmother is across the square, and Leah's grandmother is currently being routed by the town, and Sister Almut's mother is 81 and has eaten too much sugar and is, she sees now, asleep on the bench, her head tipped back, her mouth slightly open, the empty paper plate in her lap. Sister Almut says, "Again? Thank you. We are very content." The woman in the blue dress says, "Are you sure?" When Sister Almut understands that "are you sure" is the second offer, she understands that the town has procedures she has not yet seen, and that the procedures escalate, and that her refusal of the first procedure has caused the town to extend the second, and that her refusal of the second will cause the town to extend the third, and that she does not know how many there are. She understands that she has, in her own work, been on the other end of escalating procedures, that she has, as a chaplain, been the one who offers and offers and offers, gently, when a family is refusing to look at the death in front of them. She understands that the town is doing to her exactly what she has done to others, and that the doing of it is not cruel. It is the body of the town caring for itself the way a body cares for itself, which is by rooting around damage. She is, she understands, currently damage. She looks at Leah. Leah looks back. The eyebrow goes up again, very slightly, the way it did across the square. But now there is a question in it. Sister Almut nods. Sister Almut stands up. She does not stand up because the woman in the blue dress has asked her to. She stands up because she has decided to. She bends down to her mother, kisses her mother's forehead, says quietly, "Mama, I'll be back in a moment." And her mother does not stir. She takes Leah's hand. Leah takes her hand back. They walk, hand in hand, the chaplain and the teenager, directly across the square toward the Marktstrasse exit, the same exit the photographer used. The only exit Sister Almut is willing to use because it is the exit she has seen a body leave through unabsorbed, and the square does not stop them. The square, in fact, parts for them in the small civilized way crowds part for purposeful walking. The woman in the blue dress behind them does not follow. The mayor on the steps of the platform does not look up. The brass band on the north side continues the Egerländer Marsch. At the Marktstrasse exit, the marshal in the orange tabard, the one who has been smoking by the bollard, looks up at them as they pass. He does not say anything. He does, however, very slightly, raise his hand from the bollard. It is not a wave. It is not a stop. It is the small lifted palm gesture a person makes when they are noting a thing. He is, Sister Almut understands, logging them out. The town is, through him, logging them out. She and Leah walk past. The marshal lowers his hand. They continue down Marktstrasse until they reach the car park. Sister Almut's polo is in the third row. She unlocks it. She puts Leah in the passenger seat. She gets in the driver's side. She does not start the car. She sits with her hands on the wheel, and she says to Leah, "What is your grandmother's address?" Leah tells her. Sister Almut says, "I am going to drive you there, and then I am going to drive back to the square and get my mother, and then I am going to drive my mother home to Göttingen, and you are going to wait in your grandmother's house until your grandmother comes back from the fair. And you are not going to tell your grandmother any of this because your grandmother lives here. And the part of your grandmother that lives here is, today, the part of the town." Leah, who is 15, who has just walked across a square, holding the hand of a stranger because the stranger said, "Don't leave alone," says okay. Sister Almut starts the car. She drives the 4 streets to Leah's grandmother's house. She walks Leah to the door. She watches Leah unlock it with the key on a string around her neck. She watches Leah go inside. She waits until the door closes. She walks back to the car. She drives back to the square. She parks in the same space. She walks back to the bench. Her mother is still on the bench, still asleep. The empty paper plate still in her lap. The woman in the blue dress is gone. The bench beside Sister Almut's mother is occupied now by a man in his 70s who is reading a newspaper. The man, when Sister Almut sits down and gently wakes her mother, looks up at her over the newspaper and says, in the same too clean High German the 4-year-old used, the bell has already rung. Sister Almut says, I know. The man returns to his newspaper. She wakes her mother. She helps her mother to her feet. She walks her mother to the car. She drives her mother home to Göttingen. Her mother, in the passenger seat, says what a lovely day. Sister Almut says, yes, Mama, it was. At 3 minutes past 3 on the Saturday of the following year's Mitsommerfest, the square in Rheinhausen will hold 3,912 bodies, including, by then, 61 new residents who have moved to the town in the intervening 12 months, for the reasons people moved to small market towns in Lower Saxony. Work, partners, the slower air, the cheaper rents. None of the new residents will know that at 6 minutes past 3, when the square pauses, they will pause with it. None of them will have been taught. None of them will need to be. The body of the town will reach them through the bodies around them, the way bodies reach each other in a crowd, without language, through the small adjustments of breath and posture and weight that crowds make when they are doing the same thing. Marielle van Goor in Groningen will by then have stopped writing to Sister Almut Reichelt. The 73rd frame will be in a drawer in her studio. The drawer will be closed. Leah Brouwer in Bremerhaven will be 16 and will not have returned to her grandmother's for the long weekend, and will, when her grandmother dies 8 years later, not return for the funeral either, and will not be able, when her mother asks her why, to give a reason that is, in any way, a reason. The Sister Almut Reichelt, in the convent in Göttingen, will be sitting on a slow Tuesday evening at her desk, and will be writing, on a piece of paper that she will not send, the sentence, "The curfew is not at night. The curfew is the half-second at 6 minutes past 3, and we keep it together, and that is what the town is." She will, after writing it, fold the paper. She will not destroy it. She will put it in a drawer. The drawer will close. At 3 minutes past 3 on the Saturday of the following year, the square in Rheinhausen will be full, and the brass band on the south side will begin the third movement, and the parade will turn in from Markstrasse, and the mayor, who is on his 5th term now, who is sober and tired, will raise his bottle of water, and the clock on the town hall will say 3 minutes past 3. The town will breathe in. The town will breathe out. The square will be ready.